I'd like to offer a bit of guidance about working with difficult emotion. And before I do, I want to frame it a little bit for you. So I just want to talk for a minute um, to kind of help you choose really what to work with. All things being equal, we really don't need any kind of special instruction on difficult emotion. It's just unpleasant. It's just a weather system that kind of moves through and is unpleasant. And it kind of comes and it goes, gives us information, no big deal. Um, so like anything, we know the experience and allow it to shift and morph and change and give us whatever information is needed. And it's useful information, even if it's unpleasant. What we're working with, if we kind of have a sort of special strategy, I don't know how special it is really, to work with difficult or destructive emotion, is when that weather system stalls for some reason. When either, or perhaps it might be like so big that it's overwhelming, we can't navigate it. It's sort of too much. And our system tends to either get completely enveloped in it and chaotic, or collapsed and shut down. So destructive emotion is really more, when you hear Buddhist teachings about destructive emotion, that's really the kind of emotion that they're talking about, when the weather system, that internal weather system, stalls in some way. And it can stall by being very chaotic and overwhelming. It can actually also stall by being not available to us. Emotion is important information. We need to know the information it gives us, but it can stall by not being available. So that's that place where sometimes we kind of can't access our feeling. We don't know what the feeling is, and sometimes we can live much of our lives in that kind of a place of kind of being so uneasy about emotional experience that we simply kind of hold it out there, and we don't really, it's like, no, not me, I don't have any feelings about that, it's just sort of out there. And so it can be destructive in that way because it's not giving us the information that we need in order to function effectively in relationships, say, or in response to what's going on in the world. So as we work with emotion, we want to kind of have it be in that middle range. I've been talking a lot about the middle range. So we want it to not be so big and overwhelming that it's in that kind of chaotic place, and not so inaccessible that it's just too little to be aware of. So I'm going to invite you, as you practice with it this morning, to choose something that is in the low middle range to practice with. So not the biggest thing that you're maybe aware of in your life, but maybe something that's just a little bit niggling, and that it's sort of stalled, it's a little bit stalled. And that if you don't kind of work with it in some way, there's a temptation to kind of move into a bit of a war about it. I'm going to give you an example in a minute. But what I mean by a bit of a war, either a war against ourselves, oh Sharon, there you go again, you're always like that, I don't know what your problem is, blah, blah, blah. You know how that goes. Or alternately a war where you say the same things, only you change the pronouns, out there. So that, where there's a tendency to do something with the emotion that isn't useful, isn't wholesome, it leads to affliction of some sort. I feel anxious, and it's difficult to be aware of my anxiety, and what I tend to do is just criticize myself for being anxious. Or better yet, I give myself speeches. Really, what you should do about this is, and it's fine if the speeches work, great, oh, turn left here. Okay, fine, turn left. But if the speeches aren't working, then they're not so helpful. Okay? So to pick something that is in that range of curiosity, where you have some curiosity about it, but it's not inaccessible for some reason. And the structure I gave you yesterday afternoon is that place where the Buddha, realized that he didn't have enough gas, if you will, to keep going, and he needed more nourishment. He needed to kind of step back from his ideas about things and do something that was more nourishing. So, with that in mind, you may decide this morning that you don't want to do this meditation. If for some reason you don't have enough gas to do it, enough curiosity, enough interest, there's no shame in that. There's no anything. It's just wise discernment. So you can either feel free to ignore my guidance, or you can feel free to leave if you want to, if you don't want to do this meditation. So I'm going to give you an example, not because there's anything special about it, but because I want to fit my example into that framework. And as I do, I want to invite you to do the same thing. So I already fit that into the first framework of, if it's so overwhelming in one form or another, you're either completely shut down or you're completely overwhelmed, don't go there. That is not what our meditation practice is about. There are other practices that we can use. Everything is workable. It's not like there's something that's so awful it's not workable. Everything is workable, but it's sort of like, we need to be skillful in how we work with it. One metaphor I have is like, you can get to the moon, or one can get to the moon. I can't get to the moon. One can get to the moon, but there are some skills that are required in order to be, to do that. Or you can fly into a hurricane, I gather. But I'm not going to take my little Podunky 2-engine plane. Actually, I don't have a Podunky 2-engine plane, and you really would not want me to try to fly one anyway. I'm not going to try to do that into a hurricane. It's just, that would be stupid. So we really want to be calibrating. So please pay attention if what really is called for, if in your discernment what's really called for is to step back, and to step back from really that most challenging thing. The biggest hurricane that you can find in your internal experience is not what we're doing right here, because we don't have the time and the space and a whole lot of reasons to really inquire into what are all the skills that are required in order to navigate that well. My example is, I told you yesterday about, an email that was annoying, and one of the emails is one of several I gotten lately. Some of you know I've had 13 different contractors this summer doing work on my house. And one of them I started working with last April to do some tree work on my house. And they finally came to do it about 2 weeks ago. So I've been getting a little kind of cranky over the summer. Their communications have not been all that excellent. I haven't known really what was going on. So it's like, okay, be patient, talk to them. So we do that. And so I already have a little bit of a background of a little crankiness about it. And so then they did a little bit of work a couple weeks ago, and I got a bill for the whole thing. So finally, 5 months later, I got a bill for the whole thing. And I was annoyed. You know that place, don't you? Where something happens and you feel annoyed. And I realized that the annoyance wasn't just kind of arising and passing away. It was arising and staying there. In such a way that if I let that annoyance push me into behavior of some sort, I am at risk of starting a World War III of some sort, a little bit. But that I'm at risk of doing something that is really not going to be so helpful. Shooting off that snarky email back, not really solving the problem in a wholesome way. Okay, so I have this feeling. What do I do with it? So again, it's in the ballpark, that first level. It's not so overwhelming that I'm, either in total chaos, I'm not ruminating about it all day, and I'm not shut down. I know I have the experience. Okay, I can work with this. Speed bump, second layer. I think it's a good idea if I sit with my experience a little bit before I try to write an email back. To try to kind of see, not so much to try to get rid of it, because I need the information. They're doing something that I don't like. I don't want it to be like that. I want to talk to them about it. But I want to talk to them in a way that's wholesome. Okay? So speed bump. I need a speed bump because at the moment, all the emails I think of writing are not so wholesome. You and furthermore, you know that place. Okay. So speed bump. Pause. Pause. Go to bed. It's all right. Tomorrow morning. Pause. 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 So then pay attention. The third layer of paying attention, can there be a larger context? Where this feeling isn't the only thing. Well, it wasn't the only thing in that the whole rest of my life was operating just fine, thank you. It wasn't taking up the whole screen of my awareness. I wasn't staying awake at night, wasn't taking up the whole screen of my awareness. And furthermore, as I sat with it, I realized that not only was I annoyed with these contractors, I was enormously grateful because what they did do was unbelievably skillful. Like, oh my goodness, let me stand at the window and watch these artists at work. This is amazing. And furthermore, a larger context still, we've had like really difficult weather in Charlottesville this summer, really, really appreciating that their suffering has probably been rather pronounced in that these guys are getting 400 calls a day about trees that have fallen down. And they may be considering they're probably tired, they're probably overworked. So a context, a larger context. Okay, I'm still annoyed, but now I have a larger context both in my own internal experience and in the external world, where I can kind of put this, it's sort of like my toes. I was talking about my toes yesterday. Now it's an experience. Okay, now I can pay attention to my own internal weather system and see what's needed. Okay? So that fourth layer, the fourth level that I was talking about yesterday, is really, it's one of the places where sometimes our meditation practice dives right to the fourth layer. If we don't have that other kind of framework for it, we can actually dive into, now I'm going to mix metaphors, we can dive into the deep end and find ourselves really floundering and then blaming ourselves because we're not skillful enough, really mixing metaphors, that we're not skillful enough to build a rocket that can get to the moon or to fly a plane into the hurricane. Okay? And that's not the problem. The problem is that we're just not kind of setting it up skillfully. So I want to give you that framework because sometimes when I start this meditation, I ask people, please don't choose the most difficult thing. And I really mean that. So to choose an emotion that's available to you, but where you have the capacity to have a bit of speed bump, where you have a capacity for some curiosity and a capacity for some context. Then we can kind of work with it to see what else is needed. Okay? And if you don't have the gas, just don't follow my instruction. Just do whatever you want to do, and if you want to leave, feel free to do that. Okay? Okay, good enough for now? I'll answer questions later, and if there are even more questions, we can make time for that. Okay, we good? Good. So wise discernment, just looking to see what's available for us. So just take a minute, as always. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ring the bell just to mark a difference between that concept and our practice. So that was all concept. And now we come into practice with it. Feeling this body sitting. This body breathing. Here. Safe in this room. Safe in our own discernment about what's good for us, what's not good for us. Our choices, that we have choices. Here. Breathing. Bring into mind any sense of gladness or goodness that you may have experienced already today. Ah, the sun is shining. There's coffee. Whatever. Little gas for the journey. Anytime you get lost, you can come back to the sense of stability of sitting or the breath or the beauty of nature. The sun is shining. We can always find ourselves again anytime we get lost. This body, this breath. So bring into your awareness an emotion that you're curious about, that you're interested in. Maybe some quality of mind and heart that causes a bit of stress or difficulty or confusion, not sure what to do, how to act, how to speak. Sort of like my email example. I'm not sure what to say about this. Don't want to disregard my feeling, but I also don't want to start a war with myself or with anyone else. So really get a sense of that emotional experience, and we'll investigate it a bit. And here, I forgot to say this yesterday about the investigation piece, that when we're meditating, investigation isn't about reflecting. It's not about thinking. And that may be what the teacher meant when they said, do it later. Investigation in meditation is directly knowing our own experience, contemplating, directly knowing our own experience. So in this case, there's this difficult emotion. See if you can find it in the body. Let go of stories about it, ideas about it, theories about it They're there. It's just the mind trying to be helpful. But in this case, the body knows something that the mind doesn't know. See if you can find it in the body. Sometimes, by the way, when we look in the body, what we actually find as a difficult emotion is the experience of resisting knowledge and awareness of a difficult emotion. And if that's the case for you, perfect. That's the difficult emotion that you're working with, the resistance itself. That kind of stuckness. Your body knows something that you don't yet know with your mind. No problem. We're just listening to the body. Can you find it in the body? What's the experience in the body? Is it in your elbow? In your arms, your hands, your jaw, your belly, your back? All of the above? None of the above? Where is it in the body? Look and see. Now look to see if you'd be willing to give that feeling, that experience, that emotion, your permission to be there. And here's the deal about that. A possible answer is no. See what's true. It's the truth that will set you free, not your theories about it. Look to see if you would be willing to give that feeling, that experience in your body, your permission to be there, even a tiny bit. Even one of my teachers says, even a hair of permission. Look to see what's true. If no, if the answer is no, then again, just shift your awareness. Look to see if you would be willing to give the no permission to be there. And if the answer to that is no, look to see if you would be willing to give that no permission to be there. Keep going until you find a place that you would be willing to allow. And I give this experience my permission to simply be there. And if the answer is yes, then hang out with that a little bit. See how much permission you'd be willing to give it. There's no rule about how big it needs to be. Just look and see what's true. Again, we don't want to be overwhelmed or underwhelmed. You want to keep it in the realm of curiosity. What's true? Simply what's true. Breathing, feeling ourselves sitting here in this room, noticing the weather internally, what's true. am I willing to give my experience, whatever it is, permission, letting go of thoughts, judgments, criticisms, theories, directing awareness to the experience itself. And here's a deepening of what we mean by investigation. We're not theorizing about it so much as learning what the experience is kind of composed of energetically. Does this feeling, this emotion, have a shape in your body, wherever it is? If it's in your whole body, is there a shape? Is it filling your whole body? Is it the shape of the body? If it's in your chest, is it a ball? Is it a block? Is it rectangular? Is it round? Square? Does it have a shape? Look and see. Does it have a size? Look and see. If it's resistance, how big is the resistance? If it's an emotional experience itself, it's anger, how big is it? It's the energy of earth, form, solidness, its size, its shape. Does it have a weight? Is it heavy? Is it light? Maybe, maybe not. Some of these questions will be useful, some of them not so much. Ignore the ones that don't help. If it's round, is it round and heavy like a bowling ball? Is it round and heavy like an open circle, or light like an open circle? What's it? Does it have a weight? Does it move? Quality of air? Does it move? Or is it very still? Does it jiggle? Tickle? Rumble? What do you notice? What's true? It may change as you look. That's fine. If it does, and it disappears, the whole thing disappears, there may be something else that wants your attention. There may be a feeling, an emotion behind the emotion. If you want, you can shift attention to that. And if it disappears entirely, then awesome. There you are. There you are. Just rest in the silence and see what arises. We're simply knowing experience. If it gets stronger, bigger, heavier, harder, still want to keep it in that realm of curiosity? Keep ourselves, rather, in the realm of curiosity, so that our awareness maybe can be big enough to include it bigger. So shape, the size, the texture, whether it moves, whether it stays still. Does it have heat associated with it? Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it wet? Is it dry? Does it have a color? Maybe, maybe not. Look and see, what do you know to be true about this experience in your body? Can you give it permission to be like that? How big does the feeling want to be? Is there something that's keeping it constrained? Here you have a choice. You can discern. It's part of the investigation. If it wants to be bigger, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's disappeared entirely. I don't know. If it wants to be bigger, however, look to see, would you be willing to give it permission to be as big as it wants to be? Sometimes I have feelings that want to be as big as several galaxies. Look to see, would you be willing to give it permission to be as big as it wants to be? And if not, same instruction, then bring awareness to to the experience of keeping it small, and bring awareness to that. How do you do that? Does that have a shape, a size, a texture, a color? What do you know about that? We're just being curious. We're just investigating, looking to see what's true in our experience, just here, just now. We can know that whatever it is that we're experiencing is not personal. It's how it is to be a human being in this form. It's not personal. There are causes and conditions, infinite ones, externally, internally, that give rise to these weather systems. It's not personal. And at the same time, we can work with it personally. We can inquire. We can see what's needed. So take a moment, and wherever you are with this experience, maybe with the emptiness, maybe with a huge, big galaxy-wide feeling, maybe with a smaller experience, whatever it is, pose the question sort of directly to the experience. Ask it what is needed. And here's the thing, then just be quiet and listen. What do you need? And if nothing happens, see if you can let that be okay. But just ask, what do you need from me? And just listen. And then check your curiosity. Whatever it is that's arising, can you allow yourself to be curious and interested and kind and compassionate about the frailties and tenderness of this human life? It's just how it is. It can't be fixed, this frailty, in any ultimate sense. We can find ways to navigate, but it's just how it is. It's really not personal. We can love ourselves, care for ourselves, care for one another, nevertheless. So honoring that every single person in this room, every single one of us, will have had a different experience of that. The causes and conditions that have come together to make Sharon in this moment will be different from the causes and conditions that have come together for you. I'll make a little bit of room if there are questions about that practice, and if you don't want to listen, don't. You know. Our managers are going to look for Heather, who will be doing the interviews this morning. So we have a few minutes for if there are questions or confusions about that. Anybody want to ask anything? Yeah, Susan.
My question is about sort of deciding in your practice when you're sitting, just focusing on your breath, trying not to come into awareness of feelings or challenges, and when do you sit down to look deeply and acknowledge and sort of focus on a challenge.
Uh-huh.
I sometimes feel conflicted about when and what I should be doing
Nice.
in sitting practice or in other practices.
Yeah, I see some nods around the room as well. So the question is, how do we decide whether to pay attention or not? I want to respond to it, but in a way there's no refrigerator magnet on that one. Exactly. It's sort of like, in a way, it's like asking, when, my friend asked me to go on a trip to the Grand Canyon. How do I decide whether or not to go? Well, gee, trip to the Grand Canyon, that sounds really nice. I've always wanted to do that, and I'm, sure a road trip would be fun and exciting, and how do I decide? Part of the question is just the circumstances itself. Just like, what's going on in my life that, do, basically, do I have enough gas, internally and externally to navigate this? Do I have the resources to work with it? And the resources can include external supports. I mentioned yesterday that I had a difficult experience with my family, and my husband was enormously helpful in helping me make a context for it, because I couldn't, I was just sort of locked into the fact that this family member has always been like that. And it's always been annoying, and so that I had support, I had help. So I think really it's really a question of, whether or not the plane is, really ready to fly into the hurricane, or the storm, or however big it is, And those pilots, they kind of come out, they kick the wheels, they check the instruments, they make sure that the pilot has slept well and eaten breakfast and all those sorts of things. It's just a choice, really. But we have to kick the wheels first and just see what we have internally and externally, what we have juice for. And part of the having juice is, am I willing to approach this with curiosity? Because if I'm approaching it with some kind of shame or criticism or judgment or some sense of what I should be doing and how I should be, and so-and-so's like this and what's wrong with me, and that's not going to get us anywhere. So then we work with loving kindness practice and compassion practice to really have a bit more tenderness and appreciation for this human condition. Because if we approach it with an assault of some sort, we're not going to get very far. Our bodies will object. Go figure. They don't like it. So, okay? Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Yeah, Greg. Here, hold on just a second.
Relatively speaking, it's easier to do this practice here with you guiding us in the meditation hall. My challenge is, how do I do this at 7:30 in the morning when everyone's trying to get ready for school and work, and we're in a hurry, and something is said or done, and these hard feelings come up, and that's my question.
Well, it's a little bit. Did everybody hear the question? Yeah. It's a little bit like asking LeBron James, how do you make a foul shot? That if you wait to practice until there are 4 seconds left in the game, and you're standing on the foul line, and then you think, I should have practiced my foul shots, It's just not really good timing. So part of it is, that's why we come on retreat, isn't it? That's exactly why we come on retreat. That we don't have, 4,000 things, wanting our attention, and it gives us the space and the support and the guidance and the confidence. If I get in trouble, there's somebody here who might be able to help. It's why, Michael Jordan famously, got cut from his JV basketball squad because he wasn't good enough, and he worked with a trainer. So we cultivate, we practice, we cultivate those skills. And then at, 7 o'clock in the morning, then we kind of know I need a speed bump here because this isn't the time, for me to kind of pause and really look at it. However, LeBron James can probably do it because he's practiced enough. So, it's sort of like we can get good at it so that we can do it much more quickly, much more fluently, much more easily, more like, oh yeah, this is just weather, it's not a big deal. So I mean, if it were me standing at that foul line, it would be a much bigger deal. I don't have the skills, but we can cultivate those skills to be able to have them available to us when we need them. And isn't that the point of our practice? The practice isn't about getting really good at sitting still. The practice is about cultivating the awareness of suffering, the causes of suffering, and the ending of suffering. So that's really what we're doing. Does that help? So, probably at 7 o'clock in the morning, we use whatever skills we have. And then if they're not quite adequate, then we use a speed bump. We wait till we have the time and energy and maybe the help of our friends, wherever they are, to kind of help us navigate. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Anything else that's burning? It doesn't look like there is. Let's just pause there. If there are more questions later, you can just let me know. Again, we have about 10 minutes before the interviews. And this is also a walking period for those of you who don't have interviews. Let all of that go. Remember that what's needed is that we have a tank of gas. I keep switching metaphors, I'm sorry. So just kind of let yourself be outside, walk in nature, feel the ground, the air. Let it go. If there are questions, there'll be time later you can ask them. Okay. Blessings.